thank you very much, Howard, for asking me to be here. I am flattered and delighted to be able to, as a matter of fact. You have asked or suggested that I have 3 whole hours to belabor the audience, and I'm delighted to try. You asked me about my biographical facts, and I think it might be pertinent to say something. I was born in Oregon, in Portland, in 1917, and I'm consequently over 30. I was only raised for a brief time in Oregon, though, and I came to California quite early, so I consider myself a Californian, really. And in fact, my first works tend to become mission period in California. I've lived most of my life in California, except for about a 10-year period in the East, when I stayed in New York, Manhattan, and then for a few years in Black Mountain College in North Carolina. Otherwise, I've been in California almost all the time, and I have always regarded San Francisco as the city of my cultural heritage, so that I'm really a Bay Region person as well as a California person. I studied, this will be of interest musically, because after all I am a musician, I studied with Henry Cowell here many years ago in San Francisco. And then I went to study with Schoenberg for a brief time in UCLA. This was in 1940, 41, 42, somewhere around in there. And then I went to New York. And when I left Schoenberg, he admonished me not to study anymore, but only to study the works of Mozart, as he put it, study Mozart every day, which I did diligently for a long time, you know, and found I preferred him to Bach, very, very much so. In fact, everybody was always trying to convert me to Beethoven, and that didn't work, so I was always buying scores and records of Beethoven, turning them into my Mozart quartets. But I did study Mozart for a long time, and then I, in order to find some way of earning a living, which is such a problem if you're a composer, I took to writing on the New York Herald Tribune and various magazines. So I have a certain background in critical work as well, and articles too for Modern Music Quarterly. That was fun because you only had to produce a piece every quarter, you're saying, and gave you plenty of time to think, which is better than the newspaper system. You have to go to the office and write at once. I didn't even type when I started, and finally I learned how. Then after a brief period, as I say, in Black Mountain College of teaching and working there, and back in New York, I came out to California again in 1954, and I've been here ever since. Consequently, I missed, of course, the rolling Renaissance in San Francisco. But before that, we were very active in the time when Henry Cowell was around here. John Cage and I used to give concerts, and this was shortly after Cowell had left activity in this area. But John Cage and I kept it going, and then, of course, we both went east for some time. Does that about cover my biography, or can you think of anything that the audience might want to know in this area?
You might, well, how far does that take us up?
Well, just about till now. Since I've been here, I've worked as an animal nurse for about 5 years, and that, in fact, is the longest time I've ever worked at anything, and I enjoyed that very much, for the reason that, if you get up feeling bad in the morning, then you go in there about 50 or 100 individuals wagging their tails at you. It's very hard to be morose, and I found I missed all that affection, too, constantly. You pet them all the time, you caress, As I used to like to say, I can only think of one other profession in which you caress the customers all day. At any rate, I enjoyed that very much, and I have done a little writing since I've been back. I mean by that critical writing, but not much. And of late, I've been teaching at San Jose State College in Music and World Cultures, which I enjoy very much. I am left alone, more or less, to design my own course, and it keeps me on my toes. And for what's more, it's an area I enjoy, because I love the music of other ethnics. So, and I've been living in Aptos since 1954, so that I'm a stable citizen of Aptos by this time. Does that cover?
Yes.
Yes.
Very well.
Good. I would like to, you have asked me if there was anything that I would like to say in the way of ideas. And I would like to remark upon what I regard as a basic connection between myself and society, or between myself and the group, the community, for a person of my age and my experience, and that comes under the heading of copyright laws for the most part. And the way I conceive it is the following. The philosophy behind the present copyright laws is that the work is to begin with owned by the public. It is finally, its destination is public domain, in short, which makes this all possible, from publishers and even radio stations that survive on public domain and so on. But what this implies is, of course, that the rights to one's works are only loaned to one by the public, and indeed the laws have been arranged so that finally the public does own them. This is quite unlike the other arts, you know. And I should add that that these laws are concerned with playwrights and poets who come under performing arts, apparently since they declaim, you see, and composers and choreographers are concerned here too. But it doesn't cover, for example, a sculpture and painting and so on, which are works owned in fee simple. They're owned outright by their creators and can be sold and speculated on in the public market. This is why, of course, painters are so rich these days, and all artists are so rich who work in these fields, because they own their works. And of course, we don't, as composers. We don't own our works at all. They're owned by the publics, and we're loaned certain rights to them, and they're astonishingly minimal rights when it comes right down to it, for a brief period. And right now, as you know, the copyright laws are up for change. And it's long been my opinion that there really are only two answers to the problem. The first one is, and this is the one that I would like to see because it's so amusing, is that we be granted copyright protection in perpetuity. I see no reason why civilized countries couldn't do that. In this case, you see, we could buy and sell like painters did. Suppose one page of manuscript were really owned, you know, and the rights protected. Well, for example, imagine what a page of Handel would do. It would sort of support a whole university now, or Beethoven or something of the sort. And I see no reason why we couldn't do that, and then we could be turned loose in the common marketplace and make our way, because you see, this is a capitalist notion. Otherwise, we are enforced into a socialistic or communist notion by the very wordings of the laws in this country here. In a capitalist economy, no wonder that we have trouble, because if we can't buy and sell, then it means that nobody is really going to buy what's going to become a public park very shortly, and this is what it amounts to. You see, don't you agree with this notion? So that I think that it would be fun if we could have our copyrights protected in perpetuity and let us just enter the common market then and buy and sell, as it were. The other one is, of course, that if the public really does want our works to the degree that they set up laws and take them from us by laws, which is what they do now, you know, then it seems to me that they jolly well ought to keep us in the style indicated, don't you think so? I don't know why more people haven't brought this up as an argument for the public subvention of composition, of composers, because if, as I say, if the public goes to that trouble, then it seems to me they ought to recognize that they should keep us in the style indicated. Well, consequently, it's quite clear from my thoughts on these subjects that my attitude towards society is, of course, ambivalent, because my relationship with society is ambivalent because it's forced to be ambivalent by the very nature of my relationship in these things. Otherwise, of course, all of us have to simply earn our living by outside our fundamental work, and that means that we're moonlighting when we're doing our primary work, and so this makes for a peculiar relationship. One, indeed, which I rather value. I've gotten to the point where I like it that way. I can feel quite unconcerned at the so-called professional approach, for the reason that I, like little Audrey, say, ha ha, there's no such thing, you see. We're fundamentally still amateurs and are kept so, because there's no real fundamental connection with the society through our primary product. And this makes for kind of a relief. We can play more and have more fun. This is what I feel. So it, however, also gets us involved in politics, because we are at least told to feel that these things are important. And one does fundamentally, too, I think. willy-nilly we are concerned with politics. We may not be concerned with aesthetics, we may not be concerned even with money or anything else, but we are either run or we run it one way or the other, I think, and so we are. As for my, I would like to say then that as for my basic attitude towards the art itself rather than the public, but my functioning in it, I again have an attitude which is old-fashioned, because I'm sure you feel that my very relationship to copyright is old-fashioned in the general all-field system which is developing now, and which, as I pointed out to you, I think before, from my point of view, will simply get worse along with population. Nothing's ever going to get better. It's just going to get worse, that's all. At any rate, taking all these things for granted, I have 4 C's, which are sort of the basis of my present attitude, and they are, if I find anything I first that I like musically, either serendipitously or by going and seeking, I first, and I like it, then of course I cherish it. Then the second C is that I try to conserve it one way or the other. The fourth one is that I consider it. And the fourth and the last one, if it has stimulated me, I create on some basis out of which all this is led to. Then I find that as the older I grow, the less I am interested in European ideas, attitudes, and music. I find that I am interested in the music of other ethnics and other peoples. I am exogamous musically, you see, right? And much of my feeling about Europe has been more clearly expressed recently by Jan Myrdal in his book, The Confessions of a Disloyal European. I've been saying these things for quite some time, and it's nice to have someone else say them publicly, But I do feel this way very strongly, and I am therefore concerned with the music of other ethnics and other cultures, and I actively go out and seek them and learn about them. I myself play Oriental instruments and attempt to acquaint myself with the other cultures. In short, I'm less interested in the continuous development of an in-group idea like European scientific development, as it has proved since the war. And as a matter of fact, Howard, I found myself quite shocked after the war to discover that since the war was worldwide and people were going everywhere and contacting everything, that after the war, all of a sudden the European types turned in and began to develop only the European thing. It was as though they had never gone anywhere, and I found this quite shocking, and I still do. I regard it as a sort of scraping around in the bottom of the intellectual barrel instead of going out to meet other people. Does this idea strike you at all, or did you did not find it so?
Oh no, I think it's quite that way, and I think that's probably why the American composers, while perhaps not seeking, well, maybe that's why some of the American composers have just given up seeking any other cultures, because they feel they've been sold short by their dependence on the European culture.
Mm-hmm.
At least I find that in
oh, I see what you
American
mean.
Composers out here who really
and still there has been, of course, of late, a popular revival of interest in other places.
Yes.
For example, the Hindu thing is very strong now, and after the war there was a period when the Japanese thing was very strong. So that at a popular
I think surely
level,
there's the among the composers in this area, the Oriental influences have certainly supplanted any European influences.
Yes,
I think they're
more
people
are
maybe for the first time developing a sense of being composers. From themselves instead of being European composers. Think of the terrible times around the 50s when most of the composers, young composers around here, were feeding off every event that happened, a musical event in Europe.
Yes, this was the period I found so shocking.
Yes, it was.
Of course, I was raised, again, in my American heritage. I was raised on the New Music Edition, and the work around Cowell and Ruggles and Ives and Rieger, what I like to call the New Music Group. And we even then had a very strong sense of American identity, which was different from the European identity, you see. But we had, through Cowell primarily, but also through a few others, Colin McPhee and Eichheim and several others, we had had already an interest in musics other than Europe as a background, so that my heritage in studying with Cowell, of course, is in that, and consequently, I'm delighted with all these rapprochements, and continue my studies in ethnic music. However, I'm not primarily interested intellectually in simply a pan-ethnic approach. That is to say, everything thrown into the pot and then boil, for 15 minutes. I am selective about that, and I've adopted a name which I call trans-ethnic, and that means an approach in which the selection is on a basis other than whether you like it or not in any emotional attachment sense. For example, tuning. After studying through the Parch book and testing it myself and starting to train myself in intervals, I realized, of course, that this is a matter that's beyond opinion, and is a basic experience. After you've experienced and know about rhythm, then you know about pitches by actually studying the interval relationships, and that's a trans-ethnic idea. That is a matter of selection for any ethnic. And I would hold for a music that was in tune, you see, according to just intonation intervals. Of course, it's surprising the number of people who intentionally make music out of tune, and sometimes very beautifully. For example, the lovely wayang kulit gamelan, the gender wayang in Bali is intentionally tuned about 7 cents apart, I think. They're in pairs, and that accounts for that beautiful warble that it has, the lovely thing. Well, this is a good example of using things that are out of tune. But generally, I would hold as desirable the study of just intonation. Also, it opens up a whole realm of music that hasn't yet been explored. If you see, there seem to me to be two ways of organizing intervals. One is to put them all together and then write music at the resulting gamut. This has been the customary one. The other one I discovered, which has not been used to any degree, is the associating the intervals as you go along instead of arranging them in any order. Consequently, you don't know how many notes there will be taken all in all in the whole piece. And so far as I know, I'm the author of the only piece in this idiom, which I call freestyle at all. Well, so much. My destination is constant exploration and the culling of things that I regard as valid for all human beings insofar as they are sensuous. As for aesthetics, or what are called aesthetics, I have no interest in them at all. Styles, for example, I regard as technical interests. Do you have that idea?
Yes,
styles,
I think so, yes.
They're technical interests, aren't they?
It seems to me that the honest aesthetic judgment is the one that you make when you reject it, when you've rejected the other idea of...
So that inherent in your composing technique is your aesthetics.
I should think so, wouldn't it? Isn't aesthetics what one judges to be sensuous?
Yes, but of course now, you see, I'm very old-fashioned, and nowadays, every time I get into one of these discussions, I discover that I'm involved in sociology somehow, quite unexpectedly. That everything has to mean something, either metaphysically or otherwise.
Who says that? Is that in what sense?
Well, for example, I'm quite well aware that when I regard just intonation as for myself a criterion, I'm quite well aware that just intonation, notation of rhythms specifically, and so on, are regarded as all utterly unimportant by a whole school of thought today, you see, because of the sociological and, how shall I say, it's not aesthetic, is it? It's metaphysical approach to the art proper. You see what I mean? The parameters have changed, so I feel that these things which are so concern me are of no real concern at all to other people, or to younger people primarily. Let's put it that way, and. Consequently, well, that's all right too. Why shouldn't I work on something that is as it were in a fantasy bag of my own? It's sure to hold some interest for somebody else. Well, I thought that I might take up your kind invitation and present 3 programs of my music under 3 general headings. The first under early pieces and what I call my mission style, because it is basically music concerned with being a Californian. And then the second concert might include works which are of a more general for the concert-going public, because I do tend to write for lots of different kinds of people and different occasions. And then a third program I thought might concern itself with works influenced by political ideas and the Orient and technical considerations that have fascinated me. Then possibly I could start introducing the individual pieces of the first program. Right.
Fine.
One of my earliest pieces is a cembalo sonata. That's a harpsichord, of course, and it was written back in 1934 or 5, I think. In the present version, it is charmingly played, as is the whole set, by Margaret Fabrizio. I went down to her old home in Big Sur one day, and we tuned up her harpsichord into correct just intonation to see what it would sound like. It was an experiment, as a matter of fact. And the recording, which is done on her woolen socket in the home, is not studio recording, but it's still quite acceptable and has her charming playing and has the interest of having just intonation here. This is one of my mission period works, as I call them, and the whole set of 6 sonatas sort of alternates the Spanish feeling and the Indian, so that it starts out with one of the chromatic Spanish ones, then proceeds to Indian, and so on. In the last one, the 6th, some effort is made to combine the two sounds. Next, a suite for percussion, which I composed just before I left San Francisco in 1940. This was one of the last works I did in what might be called my percussion period. It was after the period when John Cage and I were giving concerts, respectively, in Seattle and San Francisco, and together in San Francisco. And by this time, I had created a quite elaborate set of traps for myself. In short, this is last quartets in the percussion style, you know. And this particular performance is superbly done. It was done in the Museum of Modern Art in New York by Paul Price and the American Percussion Ensemble. And every fourth pianissimo is there, you know, and every fortissimo. It's beautifully done. I think it's a very enjoyable thing. It's in three movements, an allegro, a kind of aria for woodblocks in a way, and then followed by another allegro. my Mass was begun just as Hitler marched into Poland, and in its original version, which was to take off from the early California Mass sung by Indians to native percussion instruments in the mission, my Mass was originally accompanied by percussion orchestra with a unison chorus, and was indeed an effort to reconstruct something of the early Indian California Mass. The Kyrie in the original version is accompanied by bass drum and snare drum, and is a very heavy and tortured military march over which the chorus sings "Have mercy," you know. This I altered and, as it were, cleaned up for church presentation many years later for trumpet, harp, and strings, and I counterpointed it, though the choral part remains the same. It is derived from my California mission period.